want to ask you this question. And you said earlier you don't really know, but do you think the Pistons will be better this season with these additions, with Karis LeVert, bringing back Paul Reed, and adding Duncan Robinson?
So I'm going to say yes, but as Trajan said, today as well, is I do think like if they are going to be better, a lot of it is going to rest on those young players. And I can understand why Pistons fans would have trepidation because like in the years past, we heard from like Pistons front office regimes that if we're going to see improvement, it's going to come from the young players. I think what
Mhm.
this front office has done a little bit better than the ones of the past is supplementing this team with capable veterans who can contribute on a night in night out basis. But it is definitely like if the goal is to advance in the playoffs and to go to the next round, like I do think it's like fair to acknowledge that that is a risk to expect like just this group mostly untouched with just a couple of switches to make. Now, I definitely think like I'm going to lean towards the fact that they do improve just because I think it's possible that Cade can have like a first or second team all NBA caliber campaign. I do think that Asar Thompson, healthy and after a full off season, is going to be a better player. He's like Trajan even said today, but I already knew in the back of my head that guy had to have been living in the gym this summer and just working his butt off. I'm really interested to see what Ron Holland looks like in summer league and just to see because not even to say that like you necessarily can take a whole lot, but if he's dominating summer league, that's normally a good sign because that means he's progressing well and that means that he belongs on that highest level NBA action. The more he improves, the better this team is. So it's definitely like one of those things where like like I think it's fair to acknowledge that the front office is taking a risk, but I can also understand the reasons why they have that faith, and again, like worst comes to worst, I still think Detroit could be in a position where they can make a move by the deadline and find someone potentially if they want to go and bolster their roster and try and find someone else. But I don't think it's crazy to say that like the Pistons can improve by a couple of wins next year. I think Vegas had them at 45.5 wins on the over under as of right now.
Yeah, it's funny. That was like actually one of the topics that I had next. We're gonna talk
Oh,
about the.
I'm
It's all
so
good.
sorry. Damn it.
It's all good, man. It's all good. We can kind of like make it just like one big topic. But um, when I was thinking of this question, I was like, will they be better? I thought of like my expectations last year. And my expectations last year were 32 wins because I
Yeah.
thought that would be you're doubling your win total and maybe you get a couple extra ones. But they tripled their win total and can't say development today. There we go. The development curve that JB Bickerstaff brought in, players drastically got better in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to believe another year with JB Bickerstaff, another year of just really focusing on internal growth and internal development, and Trajan like really wanting Jaden Ivey to get better. Asar having his first full off season, and Trajan had mentioned that Asar got a lot bigger, like muscle wise. Um, I think they're really leaning heavy on their young talent that they have, and I think that's the right approach.
Yeah.
You look at teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder. I mean, they're a prime example of not really blowing up their roster because an available superstar became available. Obviously, they traded for SGA, but at that time, they really didn't know what they were getting. They just liked his potential. Um, I think you have that franchise guy in Cade. Jaden Ivey showed in a very short time span in 30 games that he was starting to figure it out. I was really impressed with the start of this year, not having a training camp, coming back from blood clots and getting acclimated very quickly. Isaiah Stewart became one of the best backup centers in the league, just being a great rim protector. Jalen Duren, after the first, 25, 30 games of the season, started getting better at protecting the rim, more
Yep.
effort. I think they will be better, John. because a lot of these young guys really developed with this coaching staff, and you're bringing in two more vets in Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson, and bringing B-ball Paul back, Paul Reed. Um, I think the locker room is probably going to be similar. Who knows if we're going to get those videos with the championship belts again? But I mean, like, I honestly think like 45 and a half. I think we're talking about 45, 50 wins. I think Vegas thinks the Pistons are going to be good too.
Yeah, no question. And I think that especially when you look at the Eastern Conference as a whole, I think a lot of those games in theory should get a little bit easier with, some of those teams kind of taking a step back. And then, also you just look at the path, like, for Detroit, like you said, with a lot of the teams that they can kind of look at as like examples, like the Pacer, even like the Pacers, who I would say is like another team that Detroit can kind of look at as like inspiration. When they went and made the Pascal move, like they kind of they didn't necessarily rush into that. They waited, a decent while. It was after they had their run in the in-season tournament, which by the way, I think that's kind of something that Detroit can capitalize upon as well. But even then too, it's like they waited until it was the right deal. And if you really look at what they gave up for Pascal, it wasn't much.
Mhm.
It's turned out to be very, very team friendly for the Pacers. And the other aspect as well is like, I'm really glad you brought up the JB Bickerstaff point, because if you really think about it, the only young guys on this team that have even ever had the same coach 2 training camps in a row are Cade and Stewart at like the beginning of their careers. Otherwise, like a lot of these young guys have had to learn a brand new system or have had to start essentially a new program from
Yeah.
scratch coming into training camp. So for a lot of these guys to actually come in and not unlearn a lot of what they've done, but to actually build upon what they've been doing, I think is something that is absolutely massive. Like it's not the NFL where it's like all this completely different scheme, and like mostly like they play a lot of the same sets and it's just a lot of different terminologies, but even just from like knowing what your expectations are, knowing who's in charge and how they want things to be done, and having that consistency and that continuity to build off of is just, the fact that the Pistons have that stability, I think is just something that really leans into them doing better next year too. And if you look at JB's time in Cleveland and just historically throughout, his coaching career, a lot of times he generally has his record improve over time, not go the other direction.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be like a Stan Van Gundy situation where they went 44 and 38 and then they didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
But that was due to injury. But even when Jaden Ivey got hurt, this team still found a way to win basketball games and play really good basketball down the stretch in February, March, and April. So um, I think the JB element is another reason why I think this team will be better. And having consistency, that's not something these young guys have had. You mentioned it, 3 coaches in 3 years. You're having the same coach that you talk to any of those players. I know you did this year in the media room. They love JB Bickerstaff. They're ready to run through a brick wall. And I think all those young players really need Sean is consistency. And I think they have a coach that they love playing for. And I think this locker room is probably going to be the same as it was last year in terms of them all getting along and just love playing with each other and growing together as a team. And um, that's just me being positive and kind of like spinning my outlook on it. I really think highly of JB as just a communicator and a good coach of getting
Yeah.
them to that next level.
I think one thing that really helps of, like obviously like losing Malik as like a personality in that locker room. I think that's one thing that's kind of underrated is obviously we think of the 3-point shooting and that production, but he was a great leader and a great locker room guy for this team too. But I think that's why still having a Tobias Harris going into this season is still really big. Like I know a lot of people, look at that position, and that is absolutely a place where Detroit can potentially find a star player to slot in, and that makes a lot of sense to play alongside of Cade Cunningham. But there's something to be said about having that locker room presence, that veteran leadership, and just that guy in the locker room that everyone can look up to and still like lean on. Like I think the reason why I'm fairly confident that they can still carry on those vibes and bring that camaraderie forward is because they still have one of their, central leaders and one of their, kind of like rock hard, like foundational players like a Tobias in that sense.